Hi, Andrew Kramer here. Alright, in this tutorial, we are going to create a 3D tracking look with just 2D tracking. You've probably seen this effect where text is maybe floating outside of a skyscraper as the camera is moving by. It was in the beginning of mini movies and such. Well, usually that effect is done with a 3D motion tracker, and in this case, we don't have a 3D motion tracker. So using just After Effects 2D motion tracker, we're going to create that same look. Now let's get started. We're going to take this wall footage and drag it out to the composition area and create the new comp. So first things first, let's track the points. Now new to After Effects 7 is this workspace, and we're going to change it to motion tracking, which brings this right up. Okay, so with the layer selected, I'm going to choose track motion. Now instead of just tracking one point, we're going to change this to perspective corner pin, which is going to give us 4 unique points to track. Now the next thing we're going to do is drag these track points into the corner of this address plate. And if we just drag the inner box, we can move the tracker around. Let's go ahead and move this just to the inside of each of these effects. So right about here, and right about here. Okay, I'm going to choose Analyze Forward. Okay, and that looks pretty accurate. And as you can see, the motion is pretty diverse there. It's kind of wobbly, but that's good. That's what we want. Now I'm going to go back to our original composition and make a new solid. We're going to just make it white and choose OK. Now if we double click back on the layer, we'll get to the tracker options. We can edit the target to the white solid. And basically what this does is says, okay, I've calculated all these points. Now what do you want me to do with the data? So the target is the white layer. We want the white layer to take these 4 points and create a corner pin effect so that the white layer conforms to just the inner edge of each one of these points. So I'm going to hit apply. And right away, as you can see, the tracking data has applied itself and we have this effect. Now you can easily see how this effect could be a TV screen. But actually for this particular instance, we are just gonna use it as an address plate of the future. You're saying to yourself right now, what are you talking about? I'm gonna choose solid settings and I'm gonna take the little eyedropper and pick this brown. Holding down Control, I can turn it into that sample from 5 pixels rather than just 1, so it's just a little bit more accurate. Turn the layer back on, and that way we just get rid of the address. Now, here's the cool part. I'm going to just close out these, or actually just change it back to standard and it gets rid of all that. So the next thing we need to do is create our address, which is going to be kind of floating in midair here. So I'm going to take this medium gray layer and call it background, and I'm going to duplicate it. Hit Control-Shift-C to pre-compose it, and we're going to leave all the attributes here. We don't want to take them with us. We're just going to hit OK, and then we're going to Alt, double-click on the composition, and we just have a layer in here, right? Well, I'm going to delete this layer. Okay, then I'm going to make a new text layer, type 411, and scale it up. Stick it right about here. Now let's go back to our timeline wall and see what we got. Okay, so now this address kind of sticks on there. Pretty good. Now it doesn't look very 3D to me though. It just looks like it's sitting there. Well, let's get the position a little bit more accurate, maybe right about there. Okay. Now here's the tricky part. But the tricky part about the tricky part is that it's actually not that tricky. Sorry to say. What we're going to do is we're going to hit the U key on the keyboard, and that brings up all the keyframe parameters for this layer. Well, instead of adjusting any of these keyframes, we're going to hit the letter A, which brings up the anchor point. I'm going to set a keyframe for the anchor point by turning on the stopwatch, going to the very end of the animation, and setting another keyframe. Okay, now this end keyframe, we want to stay exactly as it is, but we're going to move forward to about here, and we're going to offset the layer about right here. Now what's going to happen is the layer is going to go back to its original position, but it still has all this corner pin action applied to it so that it's still conforming to the perspective of the address plate, but by moving it out into space, we're kind of creating a 3D parallax so that when we move past, it looks as if we're getting more in front of the layer. Depending on how far out you want it, that's how much you adjust the anchor point. Well, we don't want to overdo it, so just out in front usually makes for a nice effect. Now you're thinking, okay, how can I use this with other footage? Well, what you want to do is you want to add a keyframe to wherever the text, if ever, becomes straight on with the camera. Then anywhere around that, you want to make a keyframe that offsets it however much you think it would be offset at that point. So all you have to know is basically 2 keyframes. Now, the one limitation to this effect is that it only works either if your shot is mostly horizontal or if your shot is mostly vertical. Because what happens if the camera moves more than just one location, you won't be able to get that same 3D feel that we're going to get when we add some more layers and effects here. So let's just go ahead and work with just a horizontal pan, and let's take this to the next level. So I'm going to take this background layer, hit Control D and duplicate it. With the background layer selected, I'm going to choose Effects, Generate, Grid, and I'm going to move the grid before the corner pin. And I'm going to make it a little thicker and probably make the width a little bigger also. Maybe right there. Or better yet, let's just use 2 points. And all right, that looks pretty good. Now, what if we wanted this layer to be in between the wall and the text? Well, if we set the 2 keyframes for the anchor point, one at the beginning, one at the end, without adjusting the parameter, all we have to do is move it to be halfway between it. And watch what happens. Now another cool thing we could do is take this layer, drop the opacity, say 50%, and then take this 411 layer and add maybe a glow to it. So stylize glow, and we'll change alpha and make it composite itself on top. And let's just add a nice glow with maybe a bluish outer glow to it. Maybe a little less. Okay, so this is kind of like the future of address plates. I know I'm going to have one of them. You know, they're going to be huge. I mean, they really are. Clearly, you can see the potential of this effect and obviously the simplicity of it. Now, depending on your shot, you're going to have to adjust the anchor point. You know, I mean, all your shots aren't just going to be of a address plate that the pan comes around. You know, the camera may go beyond here over to the other side. Well, at that point, you just need to make sure that the center right here lines up properly and that anything beyond it moves at a parallax similar to what you think it would be. So, you know, you estimate it and it will do the rest. Well, I hope you found this tutorial fun and useful, and I will see you next time. I am Andrew Kramer, and thank you again.